in the world you are. We really love being able to welcome people from all around the world to NYU and to this panel about finding housing in New York City. My name is Christine Mino. I work here in the Office of Graduate Marketing and Admissions Consulting. Prior to my role here in this office, I lived and worked in San Francisco, and before that, I worked in residence life here at NYU. So I have a good deal of experience living in different cities, high rent cities, and with the housing process more generally. And I've lived in multiple different places in Manhattan and in Brooklyn, where I currently live. We've got a great group of current students that will also join us later in today's session to share their experiences. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to start with a land acknowledgement. New York University acknowledges that it is located in ancestral Lenape homelands, and it recognizes the long-standing significance of these lands for Lenape nations, past and present. We are also conscious that New York City is the largest urban Native population in the United States. We believe that historical awareness of Indigenous exclusion and erasure is critically important and are committed to working to overcome their effects in our own educational institutions. There are a few items that I want to address before we dive into today's presentation. One, that closed captioning is available, that the event is being recorded, and you will all receive a recording of today's webinar following today's event. And then we also are going to close off the chat box and encourage you to direct your questions to the Q&A box. Please take a look at those questions as they're coming in. You should be able to see all of the questions, and a team on our staff will be working to diligently answer those questions as they come in. So please direct any questions that you have to that Q&A box. Today's agenda, roughly what we'll talk about, we'll start talking about the search process, tools, resources, neighborhoods, factors to consider. Then we'll discuss some of the things you need to know or need to do in order to secure an apartment, such as working with a broker, using a guarantor, signing a lease, all of those fun technical things. And then finally, we'll spend some time hearing from current NYU students and their experience. And just a general disclaimer about today's event, we are not housing experts. The information that we'll share throughout today's session is largely based on our own personal experiences. We'll share resources that have worked well for us and that are provided on a variety of different websites, both through NYU and through the city. But these resources are not officially endorsed or affiliated with NYU. Our goal with today's session is to provide you with a foundation from which you can begin your search process and feel confident in navigating that process as you move to a new city. In my opinion, the greatest city in the world. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to first start by explaining the difference between on-campus and off-campus housing. On-campus housing is considered the residence halls, either owned or leased by NYU and operated by NYU. These buildings fall within roughly a 30-block radius or so of the Washington Square Park campus, which is the center of the Manhattan campus. And there are also a few residence halls in Brooklyn near our Brooklyn campus. Undergraduate students more or less are guaranteed housing, but that is not the case for graduate students. Graduate students on-campus housing options are quite limited. There is an application process that is now closed, but even if you were to apply during that time and get all your materials in, it's still a fairly small number of beds that are available. You may still be able to add yourself to a wait list for those spaces, and we'll provide that information in the chat if you wanted to continue to pursue some of that. But because on-campus housing is so limited for graduate students, we're going to spend our time today talking about off-campus housing. So that's any place that you may end up living that is not owned or operated or managed directly by NYU. And a lot of times I think that gives you some flexibility. And so it's not always a negative thing that on-campus housing isn't available. So we'll dive in and start talking a little bit about what that search process looks like. So the first thing to consider when you begin your search process is to start setting your expectations. based on budget, which is a big consideration when you are figuring out how much you can afford to pay. Um, Consider your source of income during your time as a student. So factoring in savings, loans, scholarships, jobs, family support, and use that as a framework to guide you and determine your baseline budget. Think also about how you want to spend your time in New York. Are you somebody who is moving here for the first time and wants to really take advantage of the city and get out there and do all the things that New York is known for? Or are you moving to New York and you are really focused on a demanding program and will be spending a lot of your time at home studying while you're a student here? And so I think considering how you want to live and what that looks like will also impact your budget in terms of your wants and your needs might be different depending on the type of experience that you want. There are several items to factor into your budget. Utilities, typically with the exception of water, are not included in the price of your rent. There may be some situations where that's not the case. For example, if you're subletting, but generally speaking, you are responsible for paying gas, electric, and an internet bill. And also we'll be sharing a resource in the chat for crafting your budget. You should also factor in the expenses related to the actual move and then furnishing your apartment. So depending on where you're coming from and what you have that you're bringing with you, will factor in how much you need to pay movers or rent a car or rent a truck. And then there are companies that help with moves, and our panel is happy to talk about their move experience if that's of interest to people, as well as companies for renting furniture or purchasing low-cost furniture. The next factor to consider as you're working through your budget in tandem is considering where you want to live and starting to research information about different neighborhoods. Location has one of the greatest impacts on price. NYU's Washington Square campus is located in Greenwich Village, which is one of the more expensive neighborhoods in Manhattan. As you move a little bit further out of the area and into other boroughs and surrounding cities, the price tends to decrease or your money will go further. This slide shows a recent report from StreetEasy highlighting neighborhoods for recent grads. Not everybody here is obviously a recent undergrad, but I do think it's worth considering in terms of, you are back in that zone of being a student again. And so these areas might be slightly more affordable than some other areas. And these neighborhoods do have some overlap to where we see a lot of NYU students living. In addition to the ones listed here, I know that there are a number of students who live in Bay Ridge, which is convenient for students taking classes at the Brooklyn campus. We also have a number of students who live in New Jersey. There are cities and towns right along the water that are very accessible to New York, as well as parts of Westchester, which is just north of the city. Other things when you're thinking about location is to consider how much time you'll spend on campus and make sure you research where your particular program has most of their classes so that you can determine how far you're willing to commute. The most convenient way to travel around New York City is by public transportation. The bus and subway systems are extremely comprehensive and most run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, allowing New Yorkers to get almost anywhere they need any time of day. And there are also several subway lines that connect to stations near many NYU buildings, which is highlighted by this map here. Additionally, the city is extremely pedestrian friendly, so we can walk or bike as a form of transportation as well. And many members of the NYU community members of the NYU community also have access to the NYU shuttle bus, which travels between various NYU locations. I recommend personally using Google Maps as a way to map out your potential commute because it shows transit options and it'll give you a sense of how much time you're willing or how much time you can expect to spend traveling to and from campus. And something that you might want to factor in. We will talk a little bit about commutes when we hear from our panel later on. Last, when you're thinking about neighborhood or location is factoring the type of vibe you want from your neighborhood. So the type of neighborhood you find desirable will really depend on your personal circumstances and what you're looking for out of your New York City experience. Students with families are likely going to be looking for different things in a neighborhood than students who are at different phases in their life or have different living circumstances. I think that blogs and social media are a great resource for this. Going to particular neighborhoods. Almost every neighborhood has some sort of version of an Instagram account that will either highlight community activities or things that are happening. There's tons of blogs out there, so always take those with a grain of salt, but it does give you some feedback in terms of things that you might be able to expect or find in a particular neighborhood. Then also using Google Street View can give you an idea of a neighborhood vibe based on the types of businesses that are near a particular apartment you might be looking at. So if you're not able to actually physically visit New York before you sign a lease or as you're looking for different places to live, it might be valuable to drop the Google Street person into the map and actually take a look around. That's what I did before I moved to San Francisco and actually was quite helpful. And then the last thing to think about as the foundation of your search process is really thinking about your wants versus your must-haves. Um, Narrowing down the list of your must-haves is a big way to start to think about what is reasonable for you and your budget and your expectations. Start big and then narrow down as needed. Do you need an elevator for health or family reasons, or would you just like to have one because you don't want to take the stairs when it's a 90-degree New York City summer day? What about laundry, a dishwasher? For some of us, those are really easy concessions to make in perhaps, favor of location, but for others are real deal breakers. So really thinking about what your non-negotiables really think about the things you must have and use that as a foundation for your search, recognizing that list might need to be a short one. I think for people who aren't familiar with living in cities or not familiar with living in New York, the idea of not having a dishwasher can be a really tricky one to navigate. For others, they're like, well, I guess I need to wash a lot of dishes by hand. And so really determining what is important to you will help you figure out where you might be able to live or what you might want out of an apartment. Other things to consider are amenities. So there are buildings that have doorman or a front desk or a building gym or a rooftop. And again, those things also tend to drive up the price. Next, I want to talk a little bit about search tools. There are a number of really effective search tools that can help you combine all of these factors. So factoring in budget, location, your list of wants and needs into one place so you can start to get a better picture of what's out there. Personally, I find that StreetEasy is really popular and easy to navigate and allows you to filter in a lot of different features. And that's what this screenshot is here. Was a really basic search that I put into StreetEasy. And that pops up with a lot of different areas and apartments. And it's a great way to start to get an idea if you're at the beginning of your search process, put in all your wants and all your needs and your max budget and see what you get. And then you can kind of tweak it from there to get a better sense of what you might be realistically able to get. Next, the big thing. So once you start figuring out where you want to live, how do you get to live there? Done all the research, you understand the type of apartment that's available for you, you know your ideal neighborhood. Now you get to apply for an apartment. One big factor in that process is whether or not you'll have a roommate. There are two typical ways to go about getting this. Either you connect with someone who has an available room in their apartment, or you connect with another student and you search together. There is an NYU Run Facebook group that can help you find someone also looking for an apartment. We'll provide that link as well as a resource for you to help starting to navigate that process. I also say, I feel like New York is such a big city. If you put it out there and let people know that you're moving to New York, chances are eventually someone's going to say, oh, my cousin's friend's sister is also moving to New York. And so the more you speak it out into the universe, the more you might be able to connect with somebody who is also looking for a place to stay, and you can connect that way. We'll talk a little bit now about application materials. Before you can apply for an apartment, you'll need to gather some documents. The exact requirements will vary depending on the type of apartment and location, but generally speaking, you'll need to provide proof of income, which we'll talk about in a moment, a government ID or passport, a letter of acceptance is useful, particularly for international students. And then if you're working on campus or getting a scholarship, a fellowship from NYU, some sort of letter from your employer or your supervisor indicating that you're being paid is also helpful in showing that proof of income. Similarly, scholarship funding letters from the university or from an external organization. And then if you have a reference letter from a previous landlord, that may also help as well. And then making sure all of your paperwork and items are organized into a PDF file that you just have saved in an email draft so you can fire it off as soon as you find your dream apartment. In terms, we'll talk a little bit about financial requirements. Income in Manhattan, many landlords for Manhattan apartments will require that you earn annually at least 40 to 50 times the amount of monthly rent. So if the rent is $1,500 a month, you may need to show $60,000 in annual income. In outlying areas of Manhattan or in Brooklyn, Queens, New Jersey, many landlords will require less income, but still that income requirement might still be there. Roommates, sublets, all of those things will factor in and may change that calculus a little bit. And I know what you're thinking. I'm going to grad school. I'm going to be a full-time student. I'm not making $60,000 a year. What am I supposed to do? In those situations, that's where a guarantor or a cosigner will come into play. This is someone who is, legally speaking, willing to take the financial liability of your lease if you're unable or unwilling to fulfill it. The guarantor is not generally not required to pay anything. They're just agreeing to be responsible your fallback if something happens. If you're sharing an apartment, you can either have, most often you'll have one guarantor, but it depends on that landlord. They're not required to accept multiple guarantors. So that's where speaking with a roommate can help factor that in or help figure that all out. This is also how guarantors are also helpful if you don't have any credit in the US, if you don't have a US bank account, if you have poor credit, all of those reasons that may make it difficult for you to apply for and be approved for an apartment, a cosigner or a guarantor may be able to help. We'll talk a little bit about this during the panel as well, but landlords may ask for 3 or more months of rent as a security deposit if you don't have a guarantor that's US based or if you don't meet some of those financial requirements. And then another thing to keep in mind is you'll need to have instant access to enough money to pay a month's rent for that security deposit when you sign. If you're approved, you'll be asked to submit that security deposit right away. So keeping that in mind that you have those funds available immediately, so that if you're approved, you can secure it. In terms of timeline and timing, if you're planning to move to New York at the start of classes, so in September, now is the perfect time to get really serious about your search. Apartment leases are usually signed 4 to 6 weeks in advance of a move-in date, which for people who aren't from New York or not from a city sounds really fast, and a little bit stressful to not have a place to live a month before you move. But New York housing moves really, really fast. And so keep that in mind. When you see an apartment that you really like and you're ready to sign, submit your paperwork and be ready to go right away. And then also don't get discouraged if the apartment you really wanted falls through. Know that there'll be another one, and just keep on plugging away. There are plenty of places to live in New York. It's just about navigating that process and finding it. If you're unable to visit New York before classes begin and you don't feel comfortable signing a lease virtually, which we'll talk a little bit about in the panel as well, short-term rentals are an option. Airbnb is not what it was in New York anymore, but there are ways that you could have longer term rentals, or you could sublet apartment for a month or so to get a better sense of your search process. And with that, we are going to start the panel discussion. So I'm going to ask our panelists to turn on their camera, and we will introduce them. While they're doing that, I forgot one thing I do want to highlight is NYU's off-campus housing website. So this is a new resource for NYU students. It provides some property listings, but it also lists a number of really valuable resources that you can utilize that help you understand the process a little bit better, connect you to city resources as well, and also allow you to connect with other NYU students who may be looking for an apartment or for a roommate. So we will be sure to drop that link in the chat as well. Be sure to sign up. You do need your NYU login to create an account, but it is a truly valuable resource. And And so we're going to ask our panelists to hop on and do introductions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can see everybody a little bit easier. And my introductory question for our panelists is to ask them to talk a little bit about their experience. Talk about where you live in New York, your current living situation. Do you have roommates? What kind of building are you in? Something that you particularly like about living in your current environment or in New York. And then maybe talk a little bit about your commute to campus. If you could also give a brief overview of your housing search process, I think that would be super helpful. And I am going to ask who's first on my screen. Vamsi, I will ask you to kick off our introductions today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Christy. Hey guys, my name is Vamsi and I am currently a student at NYU Tandon studying cybersecurity. I live in Brooklyn, New York, in an area called Dyker Heights. The house I'm living in is called a Brooklyn brownstone, which is an architectural marvel unique to New York. I currently live with two other roommates. I found one of my roommates on one of NYU Facebook groups, and the other roommate, my roommate found. So it was the connection there. A little bit of networking. So once I finalized on our roommates, I had begun my house hunting where we had utilized the resources that are available at NYU. Uh, you know, the social media groups such as Facebook and WhatsApp, where people regularly posted sublets as well as houses to be leased. We were able to scroll through it and found a broker who was, who took in our requirements and was able to find us a place where we are currently living. I would highly suggest you guys to utilize all the social media groups which Christy had mentioned, Facebook, WhatsApp. Along with your acceptance letter, there should be some links to them. Furthermore, once you go on Facebook, you can also search for them yourselves. It takes me about 35 minutes to commute to the Tandon campus in Brooklyn, which is where I take my classes. And on a good day, it takes me about 40 minutes to get to the Manhattan campus, which is where I'm working right now. Uh, all in all, it's a safe neighborhood. The subway station is about 4 blocks away from my place, which is walkable. And there is some ample bus service also next to my place, which is pretty convenient when the subways are down or when the weather is just not good for walking. Thank you.
Thanks, Vamsi. I appreciate that insight. Shristi, you are next on my screen.
Hi everyone, my name is Shrishti. I am currently a student with the School of Professional Studies. I'm doing human resource management. I moved here almost a year ago now. I have one other roommate. We both moved in together, so I didn't have to look for a roommate, which was something I found a lot easier than what other people do. But currently we're living in a two-bedroom. So in New York, it's very common to have flex rooms. So technically we have a living room that we've converted into a bedroom. So we're living like that. It's a 5 floor building. It's a walk up, which is a little bit difficult and it's pretty common in New York, but it's not too bad. In the area itself, we have 5 subway lines, which makes it very convenient to go to any other boroughs if you want to. Coming to campus, it's probably like a 30-minute to a 40-minute train ride every day. I do have work on the Washington campus, but I also do my classes in the Bryant Park campus. So to Bryant Park, it's a 25-minute ride, and then to the Washington Square campus, it's almost a 40-minute ride to school. But yeah.
Thanks, Shristi. Annie, you're up next.
Okay. Hello, my name is Annie. I am going into my second semester at NYU SPS. So within the first year, I've kind of bounced around a lot. All last year, I was located in Gramercy, which is about a 25-minute walk from the Manhattan campus, right by Kips Bay. And then I was able to sublease for a month this summer in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. And now I am living in Astoria, Queens. Um, and that's about I want to say 45-minute commute to the Manhattan campus, but about 10 minutes of that is me walking. And right now the apartment is 3 stories, also in a brownstone. And yeah, it's a lot better than it was before. The first apartment in Gramercy, while I was super close to campus, it almost felt like I was paying for the location, which for a first year student, this was first year student and first time living in New York, was definitely needed so I could learn and grow and learn about the city. But now that I've somewhat figured it out, I'm ready to get out of Manhattan, and now I'm located in Queens. But yeah, I do have family in Long Island, and randomly, a lot of students in my program do commute from Long Island. So I've been able to take the train from Long Island and come into a Grand Central, which is super easy. It's kind of nice because you're commuting with a lot of people. So I feel like, I don't know if this was just me, but like coming from Connecticut, I don't really know the scene. And I feel like I'm the only one doing things sometimes, but everyone's commuting at the same time as you. You're always going to find a buddy to follow, whether you're in one borough or not. So yeah.
Annie, I think that's good context and a helpful reminder that New York can feel a little overwhelming at times, and it does, give yourself time to figure it out, but there are so many different opportunities in different areas to live. So thanks for sharing that. And Yulani, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yulani. I am originally from Washington, D.C., but I moved from Columbus, Ohio to Parkchester, which is a neighborhood in the Bronx, right on the 6th line. I was also very fortunate and lucky to be moving with my roommate, who is actually my partner. So we live in a 1-bedroom in an apartment complex. I guess you could say it's not very typical of what New York is, with brownstones and walk-ups. I have an elevator, but I live on the 11th floor. So our experience was actually pretty smooth. I did myself use Street Easy to find it, and it didn't actually look like how it was on the app, but once I got there, it was actually a lot better than what I expected. It's really nice and renovated considering the area. What I really like about it is that it's very family oriented, very quiet at night, and everything is really accessible. I have like 2 or 3 delis on my block, a grocery store right underneath of me, as well as a laundromat as well. So I really, really enjoy it. I have a longer commute than the rest of my coworkers because I live in the Bronx and I'm a lot further up in the Bronx. So it takes me about an hour to get to the Washington Square campus. If the MTA likes me, it's a good hour. If not, it can sometimes go up to 2 hours, which I experienced this week. So MTA, count your days. But outside of that, it's really a quick, simple process for me to get there because I live right on the 6th line. I just ride it all the way down to Astor Place. And if I want to, I can take it to 8th Street as well. But going to Brooklyn takes long. So that would probably be the only downside of that. Oh, and I just noticed I am a 2nd-year student. I will be finishing up my master's program in media culture and communications, which is under the Steinhardt School.
Yulani, for that. And for everyone, for your introductions. Yulani, you bring up a good point about convenience of like having a grocery store on the corner. We ran out of milk last night and my girls don't get their milk before bed. No one's in for a good night. So it was nice to be able to run around the corner and grab some milk. And also a good point about commuting from different boroughs. So I want to make sure I underscore the point of thinking about where your classes are. If you're a Brooklyn-based student, the Upper West Side, the Bronx might not be good for you. But conversely, you know, further into Brooklyn, if you're a Manhattan-based student, also could have its challenges. So really thinking through neighborhoods, and again, really utilizing whatever map you use. I used the term MapQuest the other day and it felt quite like it aged me quite a bit. But whatever maps you use to figure out your commute, I think is really valuable. And then again, factoring in, you know, is an hour commute worth it to me if I have a place that I really enjoy? And maybe that means you structure your days on class differently or your days on campus differently based on your class schedule. So there's a lot of things to consider there. So thank you all for sharing that. And Yolani started to touch on this a little bit, but I wanted to ask the rest of the panelists to talk a little bit about the search process for you, the tools you used, how you found your roommate, any resources that you found particularly valuable when you were collecting all the documents. And anyone can start here with this one.
So I can start. So I found it a little bit harder in the beginning because I was trying to do my search online. I wasn't in New York while I was first looking for the place, so I used like Street Easy to find a lot of places. I used Facebook Market to like get in touch with NYU students or just students that are in New York City to help me out with that. It was a little bit difficult, but we found like brokers and things that brokers and people that would help us out with that. It got a lot easier when I was able to be in New York and see apartments. Um, and I just think like talking to students that were already living or like were going through the same process as I was helped me out while I was trying to look for my apartments online even.
Yeah, definitely. And I just wanted to reiterate what Christy had said earlier is like make your complaints and necessities loud. People like within your community, at home, once you get in the city, wherever you are, definitely be vocal about you moving to New York and what you want. After my first year or during my program in the spring, I kind of am a quiet person. So when I met someone that I knew and I kind of got comfortable, I just was able to explain to them that I wanted to find new housing, and they were able to popcorn me over to the next person that had also been vocal about it, and the connections were able to manifest themselves, and more opportunity was given to me when looking for housing.
Do you have
Yeah,
anything to add? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Yolani.
no, I was just gonna say, to Shrishti's point about people who are not necessarily in New York City that are looking for housing. What I utilized and what my partner and I utilized is we always asked the landlord if it was optional to do a Zoom walkthrough of the apartment, or sometimes FaceTime if that's easier, because they can just be a little bit personal and short. But if they have your phone number and they reach out to you, sometimes they'll do a FaceTime and they'll walk you through the apartment. And that way it's a little bit more comfortable so you know exactly what unit or how the layout is. Otherwise, we used the 3D virtual walkthrough tours that Street Easy has. I felt for me, if I could walk through it, then that always made me feel a lot comfortable, a lot more comfortable. So I'd always kind of just click and walk through and see, okay, this is the spacing. There's like tools in there that you can like measure how long like the wall is. So you can get like super detailed as well when you're doing that process. Because I know it's hard when you're not here. I was super stressed about that too.
Thanks. That brings up a really great point about searching when you might not be able to physically go visit a space. And a gentle warning about scams. Just be mindful that if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And definitely encouraging and asking to do those virtual walkthroughs with a landlord before you send payment or before you sign anything to verify that the pictures are accurate. Sometimes I'll see on different sites the same picture over and over again for multiple different listings, and you're like, that doesn't seem quite right. For whatever reason, the scams tend to seem pretty obvious in terms of like, this is a luxury apartment for $100 a month. And so keep your eyes out for that, ears out for that. And then, utilizing whatever resources you can. If you have a friend or a friend of a friend who's able to go look at a space, but again, definitely making sure to ask the landlord to give you a true look at it before you sign anything. My next question is talking a little bit about price. Price is an important factor when you're finding a place to live. So if you're comfortable sharing how much you pay, or at the very least sharing how you determined your budget or things that you factored in, and maybe things that, you thought would be more than they are or less than they are once you moved here. New York is an expensive city across the board, but I think sometimes things are surprising that actually, because there's so many laundromats, that's actually not the most expensive thing. Compared to where I came from. But if you'd be willing to share anything about price, budget, things like that, that would be really helpful. Anyone want to start?
I think I'll go off this
Thanks.
time. Well, I was lucky enough to find a broker who was able to find a place for us where I pay less than the average there. I pay about $800 for my place. But if you are living in Brooklyn, I would say that $1,000 a month is an ideal figure to keep in mind. It can go $200 either way. That is if you are planning on sharing, staying in a room all by yourself. But if you do plan on sharing a room with a roommate, then your average cost could come down to $500 to $600. Now, obviously, the place where you stay is also, an important factor on how much you're gonna be paying. $1,000 in, say, New Jersey could stretch a lot. You could get a much better place, a bigger place with a lot more amenities than, say, a place like Williamsburg in Brooklyn or even the Brooklyn Navy Yard area.
I can go. I definitely need to get in contact with Vomcy's broker because I definitely have heard higher prices than just $1,000 set rate, and whatever $200 goes up or goes down. I think for most part, you're going to be looking at like 1,600 minimum for Manhattan, and that's your sole paying. It doesn't really matter how many roommates you have. 1,600 is what I've experienced. But with that being said, I think that's where it comes into what Christy was talking about and what your needs and wants are. So 1,600 in Manhattan can look really good if you haven't like all the things that you want. That could be even like a window, in-unit laundry, et cetera, like a clean space. You're not right on top of your roommate. So that $1,600 goes a long way, especially also you're in Manhattan, so you can get to campus pretty quick. But if you're paying $1,600 in Manhattan and it's a small space and all those things are not there, then that's obviously not reasonable and it can be difficult and a hard place to live. So with my experience, I was doing that and in Manhattan, there wasn't a lot of pros to it except being close to campus. So moving out and still spending that same amount of money puts me in a better mental space because I have things that I didn't have before. But yeah, the prices are definitely higher than you would think.
Yeah, just to go off on what you said, Annie, I would also, well, while I'm trying to budget, I would keep in mind what you are looking to get in the apartments. If you want like a in-unit washer or dryer, you might have to, because I have in-unit washer and dryer, but I also have a walk up of 4 floors. So I think like weighing down your pros and cons as to what you would like to have in the apartment versus what you're willing to maybe walk a few blocks or like maybe not have a few lines of like trains near you or like things like that. Maybe do make a list of things that you would like to have and you wouldn't like to have, or you're okay to give up while you're trying to figure out like how much you want to pay and all of that stuff. I think that helped me out a lot too.
Yeah, my rent is $1,650 and I split that with my partner. So we both pay $825 each month, but that's not like considering like utilities for cable. Luckily we don't have to pay for water, but electric and internet, and then groceries, of course. So I think what everyone said is definitely true because I live on the 11th floor and I have an elevator. I wouldn't be able to walk up them steps that Shrishti does. That's not my forte, but I'm also giving up having like running AC, but I don't mind because New York is typically colder when we're in school and, there's fans and things like that. And then all the other amenities that are surrounding that fill the space. So, but yeah, Momsy, let me know who your broker is, please.
I know every once in a while you hear these gems and you're like, how did you find that? But again, like Annie said, just keep talking it out there. There was a question in the chat that I wanted to follow up on. If anyone could elaborate a little bit more on the roommate experience and finding that. So if you didn't move to New York with a roommate or knowing somebody, and I can't remember, Shruti, if that was your situation or not, or Vamsi, but if anyone has experience with finding roommates new to New York, and I don't know if that's the case. Anyone? No. All right. So what I would say to that, again, in terms of finding roommates, and actually I can speak from my own personal experience when I moved to Nashville for grad school, was I joined all of the Facebook groups, connected with a few different people that were also looking for roommates by sharing, I'm starting this program. I'm interested in looking for a roommate. I'd like to be sort of close to campus. Here's my budget. Is there anyone else in the same boat? Ended up connecting with a student who was in a different program. Talked to her on the phone. This was before maybe not before video calls, but talked to her on the phone, connected really well. We searched from our respective homes, and then the first time we met is when we moved in. And in my case, that worked out really well. I think it's partly a gut check. And then also luck of the draw. So that was my experience in terms of, I don't know if this person asking this question was asking specifically about formalizing a lease agreement. In most situations, if you're signing a new lease with another person, you will both be on the lease. So you're both legally responsible. You both have equal access to the space. If you are taking over a sublet for somebody else, that's where things might get a little bit tricky. It might not be a formal agreement with the landlord. It might be a formal agreement with the person who you're taking the lease from. So that depends a little bit on the situation. But if you're starting a new lease with somebody, you can both be put on that lease. So hopefully that's helpful. My next question is getting a little into the weeds, and then we'll wrap things up with some last tips and best practices. But if you all could speak a little bit about the documents that you needed specifically in order to submit that application, or any information you want to share, or tips about putting together an application to actually apply for an apartment. And I know you just went through this, so I don't want to put you on blast, but if you wanted to share your experience as a recent new lease signer, that would be really helpful.
I would love to. It's definitely the best piece of advice I got before coming to New York. And one of my friends had moved a year before me, and she told me to get all of the paperwork together before you even think about moving to New York, or before you really set your heart on an apartment. Put it in a file somewhere on your computer, and the minute you see the apartment, you can just send it. It's on its way and you're ready to go. But my mom, I was fortunate enough that she was my guarantor. So I actually wrote it down. She needed to send in her 2023 tax returns, and her credit score, a copy of her license, and one pay stub. There's probably a few other things, but those were the main ones. I think some people got an extension on their 2023 tax returns. So for me, my mom was able to use the year before, so that's good. And then I also had the broker fee, 1 month rent, 1 month security rent. So it was only 1 month. I didn't have to do 2, 3, 4 in advance, and my first month's rent. So it definitely is a hefty first payment, but fingers crossed it turns out good.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to this. So as international students, you probably do not have American SSNs, and you probably do not have any relatives here in the US who can co-sign or sign as guarantor for your apartments. In that case, there are plenty of landlords who lease out their spaces specifically to international students, where they will agree to let go of the guarantors, but they will ask you to pay maybe 2 or even 3 months of rent in advance. So you can look out for resources. Again, do check out the social media groups at NYU, because there are a lot of brokers who post with this specifically targeting international students. And if they're in the group, you could probably trust them a little more. But again, do your background checks, be careful of scams. And uh, another thing I would like to add as an international student myself is that do sign an agreement after you come here and after you've looked at the apartment with your own two eyes, because this again, when it comes to scams, you never know what is good and what is bad. And even if the apartment is good, there's a good chance that there might be some defects which you can only see with your eyes. What a lot of students a lot of what my friends did were they came to the US and stayed at an Airbnb for about a month, and then started their house hunt, where they were able to find a place within 15 to 20 days and move in after the Airbnb lease expires. So that is another option you could explore. Again, don't try to pigeonhole yourself. I understand that finding an apartment is important for your stay here, but this is a decision that you shouldn't be rushing.
Thank you both. That's really helpful and good advice and things to keep in mind. And in terms of if you are an international student, there are also services where you could pay for a guarantor, pay for a service that would act as your guarantor to help with some of those documentations that you may not have. One question just came in about the ease of moving, like the actual, and I think this is referring to the physical process of moving your stuff. I think I'll just speak quickly on it. It depends on where you are, I think, and just know that moving's never super easy. If you can afford to hire movers, I think that always helps. And there are a number of different resources, even TaskRabbits, that can help with the move. The type of apartment that you're moving into also will make a difference. So if you're in a walk-up versus an elevator building, if you're in an elevator building or a larger building, sometimes they have set days and times that you can move. So keep that in mind as well. But a lot of times students are moving with relatively little things. And so that tends to help a little bit. Finding friends who like pizza, begging people to come over, picking a not hot day. I think streets are narrow. And so that's something to also factor in the type of block that you live on. Can a truck fit? Do you need to double park? All of those things factor into the move process. But we could elaborate more on that if you have additional questions. But my final question for the group are just things that you wish you'd known before you moved to New York, or tips that you have for people searching, or anything unique or unexpected about that searching process. Any last minute tidbits or tips that you want to share with the group? Yolani, let's start with you if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, I think it's good to not be so concerned about transportation. I know it's a really, really big factor, especially because MTA is such a big system. But like, if you look at statistic wise, New York's average commute is 45 minutes. So if wherever you are and wherever you're going, you're going to be roughly within that time frame. You could be a little less, you could be a little more, as all of us have quite shown. But in as much as the MTA does get on my nerves, it is simple and easy to just get up, go to a bus, get up, walk to a train station. There's also lots of ways that you can rent bikes and electric scooters, walking around and stuff like that. So I think as much as transportation is like a big thing that everyone's worried about how long it's going to take them, know that it's simple and easy. When it works, it flows, and you can get to where you need to go. And because of how large the system is, you really can go anywhere. It might take you a minute, but you will get to where you need to go, and it's a lot cheaper than ride shares. So yeah, don't stress too much about the transportation. You'll get to where you need to go. And especially once you're here in the city, once you have your routine, it'll be down pack and you'll know exactly how to maneuver. And then you'll start living like a true New Yorker.
Annie, do you want to go next? Thank you, Lonnie.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with you, Lonnie, that I was listening to her and I was like, okay, I need to take this in, a fresh reminder. Since I just moved, I'm already stressed about the transportation aspect of it. A few weeks ago, Vamsi scared me and told me that Astoria, Queens would be way too far, and now I'm like in my head about it and I'm stressed, but I think it is going to be a good neighborhood. I'm excited. But something that I think, like I said, like what Christy was saying, definitely be vocal about what you want, what you need. Don't be too shocked about whether you enroll in the housing lottery at NYU or you go out and try and find an apartment. Try and just let it flow to you. Relax a bit. You see the big money signs and you kind of freak out a bit. Just know it'll be okay. Just take a deep breath.
Thanks, Annie. Vamsi, any last words from you?
Yeah, I would like to add that with every new .edu emails, Amazon Prime is free for 6 months. So as soon as you land here, activate your account and get all your stuff delivered to your place directly. Don't worry about moving anything or anything like that.
Good tip. Thanks, Vamsi. I like that. Shruti, anything to share?
Yeah, I think I agree with everything they said, but one other thing that stressed me out really, which you really don't need to stress out about, is if you are moving and you don't have an apartment 1 month before it, it's okay. Like it's not a big deal. Everything happens really quick when you're here. So when you find the place, you find the place. If you don't have it a few weeks before you're moving here, really, it's not anything to worry about. Like Annie said, just take a deep breath and you'll find the place that is right for you. So don't stress too much.
Thank you all so much for sharing your insight and being willing to share your experiences. I agree, everyone will find their place and hopefully fall in love with New York. And if not, come for your program, thrive, and move on to bigger and better things. Thank you to all of you for participating in today's session. Again, you will get an email with a link to the recording as well as an opportunity to provide feedback or ask any additional questions. So please feel free to respond directly to that email or complete the survey with any feedback that you might have. Thank you all again. Have a great rest of your day and enjoy the rest of the week.
Thank you, Kate and Jess, for